But first, a little later on in the show, I'm going to bring you up to speed on how vulnerable Australia has become in recent days in terms of our fuel security. We're now in a position where we have only 4 functioning oil refineries, and of those 4, 2 are scheduled to shut, with the remaining 2 under review. For all the political news in Canberra tonight about the resignation of Kelly from the Liberal Party, we'll cover all of that, I promise you. To me, this is actually more important. And it's important because these oil refineries aren't under pressure because we've a declining population, our population's going up, as you know, or any other reason that a retail product might fail. They're under pressure because of climate policy and the seeming determination of Western countries like ours to deindustrialise, to win over the United Nations at the cost of both our national security and, it's as important as this, our sovereignty. Look at the challenges we have in our region with China. If China hadn't done us so much damage already courtesy of COVID-19, well, it's about to damage us more in the name of combating climate change. Of course, China pretends to take climate change seriously, just like the old Soviet Union claimed itself to be devoted to peace and freedom, because dictatorships always play on the gullibility and wishful thinking of democracies, needing to believe that deep down dictators aren't so different from us. Well, of course they are. And so far, China has made no effort whatsoever to reduce its emissions, and its promises to do so are so far out in the future as to be meaningless. Yet the gullible West, well, we weaken ourselves when it comes to energy at a time when we need to be stronger and more energy independent than ever before. Remember all that talk last year at the height of this pandemic when we discovered here in Australia we didn't even make masks anymore? And we said then, didn't we, that we would make manufacturing and energy a priority. That never again, we said, so said politicians too, one after another, that we would be never caught out like this, that we'd never let Australia be so vulnerable. Meanwhile, what does China do? Well, last year, China opened 3 times as much coal-fired power capacity as the rest of the world combined. Because coal is still by far the planet's cheapest form of 24/7 power. And they did it in order for Beijing to strengthen its economy and in turn strengthen its military power. Well, enter Joe Biden, the new US president, who's so desperate to be different from Donald Trump. He's gone out and he's re-entered the Paris Climate Accord to do that, to be different than Trump, but also to appease young voters brainwashed about a climate emergency. The big worry is that to get even more meaningless commitments out of China on emissions reductions far, far off into the future, that Biden will weaken America's commitment to protect Taiwan. Taiwan, a flourishing democracy of 25 million people, that's the next big target of Chinese aggression, given where China's now got to with Hong Kong. As the Wall Street Journal editorialised today, and I quote, "The Chinese communists must sit back and marvel as they watch us, the US, undermine its own economic strength." It's worth pointing out that Biden, like Obama, will never put any of these climate agreements, like Paris, to the US Senate for ratification because he knows it will fail. So under Biden, like Obama, this means, of course, that the Paris Agreement has no footing in US law. But nonetheless, as the Journal notes, the administration will cite Paris to justify sweeping environmental regulations to raise the cost of fossil fuels and subsidise renewable energy and electric vehicles, predicted by the Journal to cost something like 2.7 million US jobs by 2025. Likewise, and it's already happening, Biden's posturing will be used to justify even more economy-sapping emissions cuts here in Australia. What Australians need to understand is that commitments we made on Kyoto, we met and surpassed. Most of the other countries in the world never came close to meeting their Kyoto commitments. Rather than get to a date and for the world to assess if earlier commitments made by countries were kept, there's this never-ending shifting of the goalposts. And that's where this whole new push for 2050 targets has come from, because so many countries have promised big before and failed. Poor old Australia, well, we're the mugs who do what we say, but we get treated like pariahs anyway and get more and more duped into making ourselves economically and strategically vulnerable. For what? For what? Honestly, many of these international agreements are not worth the paper they're written on. Just ask the people of Hong Kong, who were promised one country but two systems until 2049, but are now having their freedoms crushed. Or ask Australian exporters. They've discovered, haven't they, that a free trade deal means little when China wants to exercise a bit of COVID trade blackmail. There's no doubt that the Western world has been massively damaged by this virus, regardless of where it originated. This China pandemic has inflicted the biggest economic hit on the rest of the world since the Great Depression. Look at Britain. It suffered its fastest economic contraction in over 300 years. And here, of course, in Australia, we've increased our debt levels at a pace that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. The danger is that, having been whacked by COVID, we're now going to inflict even more economic self-harm in the name of climate change. And as our strategic challenges mount and China increases its emissions, at the same time our politicians are scrambling around to reduce ours, it's hard to see any coherent plan for the much stronger economy that we will need as a country to protect our sovereignty into the future. As the political class in Canberra obsesses over getting to net zero by 2050, I feel we've got our heads stuck in the sand over the much more serious challenges that are likely to emerge at any time on China. Water security, energy security, of course, fuel security, in addition to our region. Honestly, when will we wake up to what's really happening here?